state of emergency has been issued in Fortune City today as hordes of the infected have overtaken the streets.
It's now been 15 years since Dead Rising 2 made its debut, and it's arguably one of the best unlikely success sequels going. But who out there remembers its prologue, Dead Rising 2 Case Zero? Taking place 2 years after the original frank west-fronted game and 3 years before the events of Dead Rising 2, Case Zero saw the sequel's protagonist, Chuck Green, searching the small town of Still Creek for a shot of Zombrex for his daughter Katie. But before I dive into more about that, why exactly was Dead Rising 2 regarded as an unlikely success? Well, on paper, the odds were stacked against it. For whatever reason, Capcom made the decision that it wasn't going to make a second Dead Rising title in Japan, which meant separating the team behind a breakout hit and creating a brand new one for the sequel. That was risky enough, but then Capcom also chose to place that team outside of Japan. And any scholar of Japanese publishers knows that such East meets West development arrangements are at great risk of unsteadiness. Plus, the first Dead Rising was characterized by a fabulously Japanese vision of an American town, plus US foreign policy and a very Yankee predilection for excess. Could that vibe really survive in the West? Especially as it was being made north of the border, up in Canada. Equally risky were the swings the game's developers chose to take. Much of Dead Rising's winning formula was retained, but the choice to build the game around a hard deadline involving vital doses of an anti-zombie medication, the in-your-face setting of a fake version of Vegas, and switching out beloved protagonist Frank West all stood as ballsy moves. But you know what? It all worked. Dead Rising 2 is brilliant. If Capcom's brass is looking at the performance of the Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster and thinking about how to continue the series, they'd be well-minded to simply ignore the third and fourth entries. The second, though, that deserves to not only remain canon, but absolutely deserves a remaster of its own. A great part of the game's success is in its design, of course. It's tightly made, and even those riskier decisions land well. The item combining combo weapon mechanic is exactly the sort of thing that could have ended up ham-fisted, but threads the needle perfectly. With those dues given, one further thing has to be acknowledged. A great deal of Dead Rising 2's success must be chalked up to how its prologue carefully primed its most vocal audience, plus a slate of newcomers, for what it was actually set to be. And all that brings us back around to Dead Rising 2 Case Zero, which is something that probably wouldn't exist in today's market. It also isn't exactly widely available today. It was exclusive to Xbox 360 Live Arcade, and it can only be played now via Xbox backwards compatibility. Case Zero is a demo, a prologue, and a standalone game all in one, and it is exactly the sort of thing that the modern gaming sphere as a whole would be better off for if experimental creations like this one became more commonplace. You can view this game in one of two ways. Uncharitably, it's a demo that Capcom made the decision to charge a $5 for. Through a more friendly lens, however, it's a brilliant value standalone experience that can be blasted through in an hour or two, or can be used as a small but very enjoyable zombie bashing sandbox for those who couldn't afford the price of a full sequel. It tells an original story, so there's no retreading old ground if you were to play this and then Dead Rising 2 afterwards, and it makes use of mechanics, systems, and weapons from the main game, but across a whole new area that tees up the characters, relationships, and world of the sequel. For fans of the original Dead Rising, it was the perfect primer, detailing how both the Dead Rising universe and the game itself were changing in a post-Frank world. By this measure, Case Zero may very well be one of the greatest demos of all time. Yes, it was a demo that you had to pay for, but it had all original content and ultimately cost about the same as a Big Mac meal. It was the perfect way for players to see if Dead Rising 2 was for them, and for returning zombie players to see if the new direction and team was going to work for them without shelling out new release prices. Being a Dead Rising product, it was also eminently replayable, with multiple endings, many weapons to discover, and even a handful of optional survivors to rescue and side missions to explore. It was cannily released a little under a month before the final game, giving players plenty of time to experience its depth before jumping into the full-blown adventure. The value was there, but the price point was able to remain low because its costs were clearly amortized within those of Dead Rising 2 proper, plus whatever big bag of cash came from Microsoft that secured Case Zero's Xbox exclusivity. These days, there's plenty of talk about gamers wanting shorter games at reasonable price points, especially the younger crowd whose attention spans have been reduced by short-burst gaming sessions on free-to-play live service games like Fortnite or Roblox, or the oldies amongst us whose days of sinking hundreds of hours into wandering around Skyrim have been ruined by the need to do a bunch of boring adulting. We've got big publishers experimenting with titles like Mafia: The Old Country too, cutting back on bloat to get something out quicker that is hopefully no less satisfying whilst still retaining high levels of quality. Remembering Case Zero specifically though, it feels like now is the perfect time to bring things like this back, especially as the price point for entry for some games have reached eye-watering levels. Things like Donkey Kong Bonanza would be a good case in point. Buying that for the Switch 2 will set you back almost £70 if you're buying it from the Nintendo Store, which is an amount of money that will take a long while to reach if you're a youngster saving up pocket money. A standalone Prologue-esque Bonanza level priced at just under a tenner that acts as a little prequel chapter and gives you a taste of the destruction on offer would be cheap enough for an impulse buy and original enough to justify opening one's wallet.
Okay, so listen to me. So, you're saying that Phenotrans killed all these people to drive up their goddamn stock price?
And on the subject of wishful thinking, that idea of a Dead Rising 2 Deluxe remaster sounds even more attractive if Case Zero was bolted onto it. 15 years on, Dead Rising 2 is the other half of the Dead Rising narrative that is 100% still worth exploring, and after Capcom's excellent remaster of the first game, it feels like a no-brainer. And with the addition of the Prologue, it would be a little bit of video game preservation too, opening up a game that's previously been a console exclusive and is now hard to experience at all to a whole new audience. So come on Capcom, be a publishing hero and let a new wave of players enjoy Case Zero. And that's your lot. Hope you enjoyed this little dose of nostalgia. If you did, please give this video a like, subscribe to Eurogamer for almost daily videos about video games, and perhaps check out our retrospective of Kane and Lynch 2, which will be on screen and clickable at the end of this video. Goodbye.
We made it this far. I will not stop until you're safe.